The match was a war of attrition. Every muscle screamed. Every point felt like a final. Coco Gauff, battling for survival, had fought Naomi Osaka to a standstill in a brutal Australian Open semifinal. In the tense silence of a changeover. Drenched in sweat and locked in a private battle with her own exhaustion, Gauff looked across the net. What she saw in her rival's face wasn't the fierce competitor she'd known for a decade. It was something else entirely, and that unexpected. Stolen glimpse didn't just capture Coco's attention, it changed the entire course of the match and added a new, profound chapter to one of tennis's greatest stories, the 2029 Australian Open. Semi-final was less a tennis match and more a geological event. Two continental plates of women's tennis, Coco Gauff and Naomi Osaka, were colliding, not for the first time, but perhaps for the most significant. Their rivalry, spanning over a decade, had evolved through every possible phase. The tearful mentorship of 2019, the fierce competitive clashes of the mid-2020s, the respectful détente of recent years. Now, at 29 and 31 respectively, they were elder stateswomen of the sport. Their legacies secure, but their hunger for the biggest titles undimmed. Osaka, a 5-time slam champion and new mother, was on a resurgent quest for a title that had always eluded her in Melbourne. Gauff, a 4-time slam champion and the tour's most consistent force, was seeking to cement her era of dominance. Their clash was a battle of styles perfected over 15 years. Osaka's first strike, a symmetric power against Gauff's omniscient defense and counterpunching genius. The Rod Laver Arena crowd knew they were witnessing a potential classic for the ages. A match that would be dissected for its tactical brilliance and historical weight. The first 2 sets were a masterpiece of brutal physical chess. They split them 7-5, 4-6. Each set a war of tiny margins. Osaka would blast a series of aces and untouchable forehand winners to hold serve. Gauff would respond by extending rallies to exhausting lengths, drawing errors and breaking back with relentless depth. The match had no rhythm, only a series of explosive, punctuated engagements. The third set began under a blanket of oppressive tension. The games went with serve, but each hold was a monumental struggle, often lasting 8 or 9 minutes. The physical toll was astronomical. At 3-4 on Osaka's serve, they played a 31-shot rally that left both women doubled over at the baseline. Gasping for air in the humid Melbourne night, Osaka held barely to level at 4-4. The changeover that followed was the crucible. Both players sat, towels draped over their heads, in their respective corners of the arena. The crowd was respectfully silent, sensing the athletes were at the very edge of human endurance. Gauff, her heart pounding against her ribs, her legs screaming with lactic fire, tried to focus on her breathing. The instructions from her box sounded like they were coming from underwater. In a desperate attempt to anchor herself, to find a point of focus outside her own pain, she lifted her head and looked across the net. What she expected to see was her mirror image, a rival equally spent, equally grim, fighting the same internal battle. What she saw instead was different. Naomi Osaka was not looking at her strings or her towel. She was looking directly at her own player's box, where her young daughter, now 3 years old, sitting with her grandmother. And on Osaka's face, etched into the lines of exhaustion, was not the fierce scowl of competition, but a small, soft, unmistakable smile. It was a private smile, a tiny island of pure, unadulterated joy in the ocean of competitive agony. It lasted only a second before Osaka's game face snapped back into place, eyes hardening as she prepared to return to the battlefield. But Coco Gauff had seen it. That unexpected moment, that flicker of maternal love and happiness in the heart of the struggle, didn't compute. It was a data point from a different universe inserted into their war. For a decade, Gauff had defined Osaka as the opponent, the ultimate test, the benchmark, the wall of power she had to scale. In that glimpse, she saw something else: a woman, a mother, a person whose world was bigger than the tennis court. The psychological monolith of Naomi Osaka, the champion, developed a sudden, profound crack. Gauff didn't feel pity. She felt a disorienting wave of perspective. The match was still everything, but the person across the net was suddenly, undeniably, more human. The effect of that stolen glimpse was not immediate strategy. It was a slow-acting psychological solvent. As Coco Gauff rose from her chair to serve at 4-5, facing the very real prospect of being broken and losing the match, the usual cocktail of nerves and adrenaline was mixed with something new, a profound sense of context. The monstrous pressure of the moment was still there, but its character had changed. It was no longer a pressure exerted solely by the mythic figure of Naomi Osaka. It was a pressure they were both sharing, two athletes at the absolute limit, one of whom had just revealed a secret window into a softer soul. Gauff held serve with a courage born of this shifted perspective, firing two aces to level the set at 5-5. The match was now a best-of-two games shootout, but the emotional landscape had been permanently altered. The next game, on Osaka's serve, became the match's defining passage. At 15-15, another marathon rally ensued. Gauff, retrieving impossible shots, found herself not in a state of frantic desperation, but in a state of focused flow. She wasn't fighting a demon. She was solving a puzzle presented by a remarkable human peer. She won the point with a stunning backhand pass on the run. 15-30. The crowd erupted. Osaka, facing sudden danger, responded like the champion she was, firing an unreturnable serve and a forehand winner to bring it to 32-30. But at deuce, the unexpected moment echoed. Osaka, after a strong first serve, went for a huge inside-out forehand. It missed by an inch, landing just wide. Breakpoint Gauff. It was the kind of error that, in years past, might have triggered a cascade of frustration from Osaka instead. She simply looked at the spot, gave a slight, accepting shake of her head, and walked back to the baseline. The fury was gone. The acceptance Gauff had seen in the smile was now present in the face of error. This, more than any shot, unnerved Gauff's expectations. Her rival was not an emotional volcano to be managed, but a complete, composed person to be beaten with pure tennis. On the breakpoint, Gauff played the point of her life, a relentless 19-shot assault that ended with Osaka netting a backhand. Gauff had broken. She would serve for the match at 6-5. The walk to the chair before serving for a spot in the Australian Open final was the most emotionally complex of Gauff's career. She was not exultant. She was solemn, humbled. She had seen the person behind the champion, and it made the act of vanquishing that champion feel both more significant and more poignant. As she sat down, she glanced again at Osaka's box, at the little girl who had inspired that fleeting smile. The unexpected moment had reframed everything. This wasn't just a match. It was a moment in two intersecting lives. When she stood to serve, the pressure was immense, but it was a clean pressure. It was about executing her skill, not conquering a nemesis. She held at love, sealing a 5-7, 6-4, 7-5 victory with a service winner. The final point was not met with a primal scream, but with a deep, relieved exhale. She had done it. She had solved the puzzle on a day when the puzzle maker had shown her a glimpse of its heart at the net. The handshake was different. It was not the brief, respectful clasp of rivals, nor the icy tension of past meetings. It was a longer, firmer hold. Gauff looked directly into Osaka's eyes. "Incredible match," Gauff said, her voice thick with emotion. "Just incredible." Osaka, her face etched with the deep fatigue of a war lost, managed a weary, genuine smile. "You were too good. Go win it." It was a simple exchange, but the subtext was a novel's worth of shared history and the new, unspoken understanding forged in that third set changeover. Gauff's celebration was muted, her waves to the crowd thoughtful. She had seen something in her opponent that had changed the very experience of victory. It didn't diminish the win. It deepened it, making it about respect for the whole person, not just triumph over the athlete and the immediate, breathless aftermath. The victory felt surreal to Coco Gauff. The cheers of the crowd were a muffled roar as she replayed the match's final, pivotal games in her mind. The dominant memory wasn't her backhand pass or her final ace. It was that fleeting, private smile on Naomi Osaka's face. It was the key that had unlocked a different state of mind. In the press conference, while journalists asked about tactics and pressure, Gauff's mind kept circling back to that moment. When asked what the key was to winning such a physically brutal match, she paused, choosing her words with unusual care. It's hard to explain, ... There's a point where you're just so deep in the fight and you're looking for anything, any edge. And sometimes the edge isn't about getting more angry or more focused. Sometimes, she trailed off, searching. Sometimes it's seeing the other person. Really seeing them. It changes the fight. It makes it ... cleaner. The reporters, expecting talk of serve percentages or forehand targets, were intrigued but puzzled. Gauff offered no further explanation. The unexpected moment was hers to keep. For Naomi Osaka, the loss was painful but carried a strange lack of bitterness. The usual post-defeat autopsy of errors felt less sharp. In her own press conference, she was gracious, crediting Gauff's relentless defense. When a reporter noted Gauff's unusual comment about seeing the other person, Osaka was silent for a long beat. A soft, knowing smile, the same one Gauff had witnessed, touched her lips. "Coco sees everything on the court," Osaka said, deflecting with praise. "That's why she's so great." It was a non-answer that confirmed everything. The shared secret of that changeover glance hung in the air between their separate interviews. A silent thread connecting champion and defeated. The true impact of what Coco saw revealed itself not in Melbourne, but in the months that followed. Their rivalry, already one of the most storied in the sport, entered a new twilight phase of profound mutual respect. The needle of competitive animosity, which had flickered at various points over the years, settled permanently at zero. Their next meeting in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon later that year was a celebration. The pre-match narrative was not about grudge or revenge, but about appreciating two legends at the peak of their craft. The match itself was a display of breathtaking, joyous tennis. They traded sensational winners, applauded each other's shots, and played with a freedom that came from the absolute security of mutual respect. Osaka won in 3 thrilling sets, and at the net they shared a long, laughing embrace, the kind shared by old friends who have been through the wars together. The unexpected moment in Australia had burned away the last vestiges of impersonal rivalry, leaving only the pure essence of competition between two people who truly saw and valued each other. The legacy of that Australian Open semifinal became less about the score and more about the glimpse. For fans and commentators, it became a touchstone for discussing the evolution of both women. It was framed as the moment Coco Gauff, the perpetual challenger looking up at Osaka, finally saw her as a complete equal and a full human being, allowing her own game to ascend to its most mature level. For Osaka, it was seen as the moment her public persona fully integrated her private joy, making her an even more formidable and grounded competitor. The unexpected moment became a parable for sportsmanship at its highest level, not just shaking hands, but truly seeing the opponent. It proved that the greatest battles can sometimes be softened and even elevated by a flash of shared humanity. And for Coco Gauff, it remained her most cherished memory of their rivalry, not the victory itself, but the quiet second in which she understood that the woman across the net was so much more than an obstacle to her glory. She was a mirror, a mother, a legend, and in that moment of recognition, the victory became about honoring them both.